3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff.
Before SpaceX delivered astronauts to the International Space Station, it first had to rethink rocket science. Specifically, how to safely bring the rockets back down to Earth and refuel them for the next mission. Rockets that touch down gracefully once seemed like a fanciful idea. In fact, that's how classic science fiction illustrations depicted space travel. Their astronauts explored new worlds before heading home on their spaceships. The first wave of spaceflight in the 20th century relied on rockets to deliver their payloads to orbit, but then most were destroyed on re-entry or left in space, never to be used again.
This is a close view of the first stage falling away.
For the Apollo moon landing, NASA's priority was to make spacecraft reliable, not reusable. Each rocket cost about $185 million. That changed in the 1970s with the Space Shuttle. NASA hoped shuttles would go up and back a dozen times per year. Engineers realized spaceflight would be cheaper the more they could reuse their expensive technology. But in reality, maintaining the shuttles made them not cheaper than Apollo, but much more expensive. And the 5 shuttles would each go up at most once per year.
Space Shuttle Atlantis now comes home to the Kennedy Space Center for the final time. 25 years, 32 flights, and more than 120 million miles traveled.
By the time the last shuttle landed at Kennedy Spaceport a decade ago, it was clear the next generation of spaceflight would need to be rethought. Private companies like SpaceX were already hard at work on a different approach. Smaller teams, simpler designs, and off-the-shelf parts. One example, for their seatbelts, SpaceX uses harnesses made for NASCAR drivers. And of course, those rockets. They figured out how to land them.
We have to develop rockets that are rapidly and as close to completely reusable as possible. As an example, the Falcon 9 costs about $60 million. It's sort of like a jet, it's like, but the cost of the propellant is only about $200,000. So it's just like, you can imagine how expensive it would be if you had to buy a new plane every time you went somewhere. Very few people would fly. But refueling a plane is pretty easy.
It took SpaceX years of experimentation and lots of failures before the company cracked the code, reusing its biggest rockets. SpaceX designed fins that steer the rocket during landing and built a robotic ship that allows landings at sea. The rocket's software makes minute corrections to stay upright. Reusing its rockets is a big reason SpaceX delivers cargo and crews to space much cheaper than government programs. It costs more than $27,000 to bring a pound of cargo to orbit on the space shuttles, $2,300 per pound on the Apollo Saturn V, but just over $600 per pound with SpaceX, a savings of 97%.
Ignition. We have liftoff.
SpaceX is leading the way. The effects are already being felt on Earth. The company has already launched more than 1,800 satellites into orbit, providing broadband internet to people in 20 countries. It plans to launch tens of thousands more satellites to expand its reach. But founder Elon Musk has his sights set beyond Earth's orbit, even beyond the International Space Station. SpaceX says its biggest rocket, Starship, can haul 100 tons into orbit. And yes, it's reusable. It's scheduled for its first orbital test this year. Musk's ultimate goal is to use the ship to lead a private colonization of Mars. James Packard, Newsy, Los Angeles.